Hello, everyone. This is Phil from One Model. And a lot of organizations are coming to us now, and they want to look at cost data for their workforce. So they're used to analyses like this where they're seeing headcount over time or movements, but increasingly they're being asked to translate those headcount numbers into actual costs that the business can model. So I want to show you a couple ways to do that. And this is of obvious importance to understand not just who's working for your organization, but of course, how much that workforce costs over time and being able to allocate that cost dynamically so that you can follow up and do different ad hoc analyses with your partners, whether they're in finance or operations. So what I've pulled up right now is just that classic view. We're looking at an end of period headcount over time, and we're looking at it by month. And I'm going to do a few things to now unpack that headcount number and turn that into a cost metric that we can analyze, again, from the same sorts of perspectives that we would analyze a traditional headcount number. So the first things first, I'm going to go to my metrics on the left-hand side, and I've opened up a compensation grouping of metrics. And the first thing I want to do, and this won't get us all the way there, but I want to step into it. The first thing I'm going to do is just take that headcount end of period, turn it into average salary end of period. So we'll rerun that query. And now next to my headcount number, I now have my average salary. And so down in the data, what I understand about my employees now is I know how much I'm paying per employee within this data set, within each month, over time. But now comes the tricky part. I need to take that employee salary and I need to allocate it out for whatever window of time that I'm looking at. And if you try to do this in a spreadsheet, this gets very multidimensional in a hurry. Lots of formulas is really tricky to maintain. So instead, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get rid of these two metrics. And instead, I've created a metric called compensation cost daily allocation. This is another one of those examples of the power of the data model that we create in One Model. Setting up a metric like this is actually really straightforward and will dynamically account for however many days are in the period you're looking at. Essentially what it does is it takes that employee annual cost, it creates a daily amount for it, and then adds up however many days are in the period. So if you have a leap year, no problem. It'll add in that 366th day. So let's add that metric in. We're going to look at compensation cost daily allocation. This is for my entire workforce. So what you're going to see is now I have those 10,000 employees. They're making on average about $69,000, $70,000 a year. Now what I'm doing is allocating that cost through the different periods I'm looking at. And you can see it kind of naturally rise and fall depending on the length of time. So February is a shorter month. I spend less money in February because there's only 28 days. Now here in January, we're just moving a little ways through January, and you can see that last bar is shorter because we're starting to allocate cost across those days. Now, the great thing about this metric is that it's tied into everything else that touches my employees. So I can look at this metric, I could go down to my dimensional breakouts, and I could pick something like my organization units. And maybe I want to navigate down by leader, and I want to see just for, say, Dennis's group, rerun that query, and now I can see the allocation of costs that I'm accruing for just that particular section of my hierarchy. The benefit of being able to analyze your workforce by cost is pretty straightforward. Obviously, you're working to grow a workforce. You want to manage headcount, understand, percentages and breakouts within that headcount. But at the end of the day, you need to pay those people for coming into work, and you need to keep track of how those costs are changing over time. In addition, to be a good partner with your finance team, with your operations team, you need to have these costs structured in a way that you can very quickly run different comparisons and different analyses as time goes on. Okay, so now in this view, we've taken it, we've looked at a particular section of our organization, and we've looked at the costs over time. Now, what also might be useful is to be able to compare what's going on in different parts of our organization. So now, instead of just looking at Dennis, I'll take a look at that entire level of my organizational structure, in this case, level 2. We'll rerun it. And now what's happening is within each month, for each employee, for each day, we're adding up the salary that is accrued during that period for each section of the organizational hierarchy. So there's a ton of math happening within this view. You can see it's getting to be a fairly busy chart, but of course we could look at it in a tabular fashion as well. And again, as these conversations come up in an organization, you're going to be asked to be able to provide different slices, different views of how that cost is accruing over time. One model makes it really easy to sort of spread those costs out across your data set. If you're finding yourself trying to, juggle these types of calculations in a spreadsheet, or running lots of exports, or just quite frankly staying up really late at night trying to make some of these calculations, definitely check us out at One Model. These types of cost applications become very straightforward thanks to how our data model is structured. All right.